Welcome to this video on the Contax T2, a luxury compact camera that has acquired notoriety in recent years for its use by celebrities and high prices on the second-hand market. It was introduced in 1990 and won the European Compact Camera 1991-1992 award. The T2 is available in several different finishes, three are shown here. The titanium finish, the titanium black finish, and the 60th anniversary titanium gold finish. There were others. The black and gold finishes are not ordinary surface coatings, but new titanium compounds fused to the base body itself. This was achieved in a vacuum using nitrogen gas by means of titanium ion exchange. This produced a surface that is 3 times harder than the original titanium Contax T2. The Contax T2 was definitely a luxury compact. Contax marketed the T2 as a personal compact camera to set you apart from the crowd. This now looks a bit ironic given its celebrity endorsed status. The Contax T2 is a 35mm compact camera with a 38mm Carl Zeiss f2.8 Sonar Prime lens. Exposure is either Program AE or Aperture Priority Automatic. The lens aperture goes from f2.8 to f16 and shutter speeds go from 1 second to 1/500th of a second in program mode and 1 second to 1/200th of a second in aperture priority mode. There is also a bulb mode for longer exposures. The camera displays the elapsed time in the frame counter. There is a built-in flash that supports red eye reduction. The camera has a self-timer, exposure compensation is supported, plus or minus 2 stops in 1/2 stop increments. There is automatic film winding and rewinding. The camera supports DX film code reading only, and so any non-DX coded film is metered for 100 ISO. Autofocus using a single central focusing point is supported via an active infrared system, with a combined focus and exposure lock by half depressing the shutter release. Manual focus is also supported with focus confirmation via the viewfinder display. Metering is via an external SPD mounted above the lens. I bought this T2 new in 2000. It cost £499.99 sterling then. The T2 has never been a cheap camera. The camera arrived in a presentation box with a fabric case that has a loop for a belt to be threaded through. There were 2 camera straps provided, a short one and a long one. The Titanium Gold 60th anniversary camera was a limited edition camera that came in a walnut presentation box with a leather case and a polishing cloth. This is a bling camera and not practically usable in a lot of scenarios. It might win a competition for the camera most likely to get you mugged in insert city of choice. Definitely intended as a collector's item. On top of the camera is the main on autofocus manual focus dial. The shutter release made from a synthetic sapphire. The self-timer switch. The exposure compensation dial. And the frame counter. On the right hand side of the camera is the camera film back door release at the bottom. On the front of the camera is the viewfinder window. This is made of sapphire glass. And the focusing window. The self-timer LED. The flash. And the retractable lens cover. When the camera is powered on, the lens cover retracts and the lens extends. On the front of the lens is the light meter SPD. On the top of the lens is a combined camera mode and aperture selection ring. The lightning symbols set the flash mode, either a single flash or 2 sequential flashes to reduce red eye. The aperture values are also selected using the dial. The f2.8 value, which is in green, causes the camera to operate in Program AE mode. The other numbers set the aperture value and the camera operates in Aperture Priority Automatic mode. In Program AE mode, when f2.8 is selected, the camera attempts to shoot at f2.8 if the metering will allow it. If not, it changes the aperture value to give a correct exposure and lights up the red Program mode indication in the viewfinder. So if f2.8 is selected and the red Program mode indicator in the viewfinder is not lit, then the camera is shooting at f2.8. On the rear of the camera is the viewfinder eyepiece made of sapphire glass, a film check window, and the exposure compensation value window that shows the amount of exposure compensation in use. This can be difficult to see in low light conditions. On the bottom of the camera is a battery compartment that takes a CR123 battery, a tripod socket, and a manual film rewind button. The film rewinds automatically when the end of the roll is reached. The film can be rewound partway through by pressing the manual film rewind button on the bottom of the camera. There are two flash modes, both of which use program AE exposure. With fill-in flash, the shutter speed can vary between 1/30th and 1/500th of a second. When using the flash, the aperture for the flash is set based on the focus distance set. When using the two flash mode, I have found that there can be quite a delay between the two flashes. This can cause problems if your subject moves. The self-timer is activated by sliding the self-timer switch forward, so the red section shows. While the self-timer is operating, the LED on the camera front flashes. The focus and exposure are locked when the self-timer starts. In autofocus mode, the camera focuses when the shutter release is pressed. In manual focus mode, the focusing wheel is turned until the green light in the viewfinder lights up to indicate the correct focus. Half pressing the shutter release locks both the autofocus and exposure values. If you wish to lock the autofocus and exposure separately, you need to first use manual focus to focus on your subject, and then use a half press of the shutter release to lock the exposure value. Exposure compensation is set by rotating the exposure compensation wheel on the top of the camera. This can be quite stiff. The value set is shown in the window on the back of the camera. This can be difficult to read in low light. Shown is the viewfinder illustration from the brochure. The viewfinder has two focusing frames, one for general usage and another one for close-up photography at 0.7 to 1 meters. There are two corresponding picture frames, one for general usage and another for close-up use. There is a red letter P in the viewfinder. When this is lit, the camera is in programmed auto exposure mode. If it is not lit, then the camera is in aperture priority automatic mode, and the aperture set on the dial is in use, including at f2.8. The viewfinder displays a subset of the available shutter speeds to indicate the approximate shutter speed used. The LT indication is used to indicate slow shutter speeds of 1/30th of a second to 1 second when lit, and blinks for bulb mode on longer exposures than 1 second. There are also indications of when exposure compensation is in use and the state of the camera focus. The green circle indicates when the autofocus is locked on and can be used to get the correct focus in manual focus mode. The red arrows indicate when the camera is focused in front of or behind the subject in the centre of the frame. There is also a flash ready indication. The camera will not fire in flash modes until this indicator is lit. The viewfinder eyepiece is quite small. I have had reliability issues with the Contax T2, and my original T2 seems to be on its way out, with lens extension issues and firing issues. This camera was repaired in the early 2000s with a very similar issue. I was told at the time that the build quality of the T2 was nothing special, and these cameras are getting old. There do not appear to be any viable repair options for the T2, as all of the spares apparently went to landfill. The Contax T2 was a very advanced compact at the time of its introduction. The lens quality was not compromised by using cheaper components or a smaller lens design, as done in some other compact cameras, so the Sonar lens produces image quality comparable to the Contax SLR lenses. The lens does vignette, and there are other compact cameras out there with lenses of similar quality. The autofocus uses 118 steps for more accurate autofocusing, a lot for a compact camera of the period. Should you buy a Contax T2? Probably not. They're too expensive and likely to become unreliable. The only real reason for buying one would be if you needed the extra flexibility of manual focus and exposure compensation in a compact with a high quality lens. And I suspect that most people using compact cameras don't really need these features. The Contax T2 only gives a limited amount of flexibility compared to an SLR, which tend to offer much greater flexibility at a lower price. I have attached some images taken with the Contax T2.